What is an iterator in Python? An iterator in Python is an object that holds a sequence of values that can be iterated upon. It means it provides sequential traversal through all the values. The Python iterator object is initialized using iter method. It uses the next method for iteration. Here is an example of iterator. So word is a variable whose value is a string art. Then we created a iterator from word variable, and the it iterator is created. Then using next, we are iterating over the values of word. So first next it will print the first letter A. Second next it will print R, and so on. How to make a class as iterator? Creating a custom iterator in Python involves defining a class that implements the iter method and next methods according to the Python iterator protocol. So iter method is used to initialize variables and returns the iterator object itself. Next method retrieves the next available item or the value. It throws a stop iteration exception when no more items or values are available. Here is an example of custom iterator. So we have a class custom iterator. Then we have defined iter method, which initialize the variables and return self, that is iterator object itself. Then we have to define next method, which in which we will write the logic to generate the new value, and along with that we will check for the stop iteration condition, and once it is verified we return the new value. Then we have to create this custom iterator object or instance, and then from that we have to create an iterator object it, and then using next method we can print the values. Now let's check some examples of iterators. Iterators can be created from iterables like list, tuples, string, dictionary, etc. So let's try some examples. First we will start with string. So we are defining items variable which contains a string tree. Now we will create an iterator using iter keyword. We have created iterator from items. Now to print the values or iterate over the iterator, we will use next. Let's run this program. So here we can see it prints a single letter T. So if I add multiple statements, next statements, so this will print R, this will print E, and this will print E again. Let's run this program and check. So here T is printed one by one. What if I add one more print statement here? Since there are only 4 characters and we have 5 next statements, so last one will generate stop iteration error. Let's check that. So here tree is printed, and after that for the last statement this print next it, and we can see the line number as well, line number 7. So here, so this generates the exception or the error, stop iteration error, because there are no more characters. So this is about the string. Now let's check list. Let's say we have 4 items here. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are integers. And now let's run this program. So here it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, and after that it raises the stop iteration error. So this is how iterators are created. Now, instead of writing next statements again and again, we can write it in another way. So I will comment this. We can use while true, then we can have try catch. So in try, we will print next it. So we will print a single item in the loop and we will check for exception. Which exception? Stop iteration. So this is an inbuilt exception class. We will simply print iterator ended and we will break the loop. Let's run this program and check the output. So after printing 1, 2, 3, 4, it prints iterator ended. Why? Because fifth time it stop iteration exception is raised, which is handled here, and in that we have written the print statement iterator ended, so that is printed, and then we have a break statement that will break this loop, and after that the program ends. Another way of writing an iterator is using for loop. For element in item print element. So this for loop will automatically execute this statement and element will be having the value of next IT. We can directly print element. Let's run this program. So here we can see it is printed one by one. Now let's move this statement here and uncomment this. And instead of items, we can use iterator. So this for loop will iterate over this element or iterator and it will automatically use next IT and save the value in element. And then we will print the value one by one. Let's run this program. Here we can see we have got all the elements one by one. So this is how we used to write the iterator. Now let's learn how we can create our custom iterator. Let's create a iterator which will print the squares of the numbers. So this iterator will accept start and end value and it will print the squares of the numbers starting from the start value till the end value. So for that, let's create a iterator class square. Then to accept the start and end value, let's create a constructor which is init function. So we will take a start value which will be of type int and end value. We will initialize it. Dot start equals to start. Dot end equals to end. Now the most important method for creating a custom iterator is iter. So here we will initialize a variable that we will be going to use for creating the values or for generating the values, and we will return self here. So here we have already taken a start and end. What we will do, we will just create a new variable, let's say n, which we will initialize with self dot start. So why we are doing this, so I will explain it later. Let's comment this and we will just return self only. Next is next method that will generate the new values. So here we need to write, so we need to basically return a new value. So we will start from the starting value. So we need to return self dot start into self dot start. So basically we are returning the square. But the problem here is if we use this iterator, then it will uh, print the return the same value again and again. So what we need to do is we need to increase the value and we need to increase up to end value. So what we will do, we will store the result in a variable called value. Then we will increase self dot start by 1, and then we will check, sorry, we will return the value. But before that we need to check if self dot start is greater than self dot end. If that is the condition, we need to raise the exception, stop iteration exception. Okay. And if it is less than self dot end, then we are calculating the square and saving the result in value, and then we are increasing the current value of start by 1 and returning the value. So now let's create the instance of this square iterator. We will pass the start value as, let's say, 2 and end value as 100. Now we need to create an iterator object of it. So it will use iter instance, and then to print we will use next it. So let's say we are printing only first two values or maybe three. Let's check this first. So here we can see it started with 2. It prints 2, square of 2 which is 4, then square of 3 which is 9, then square of 4 which is 16. So in order to print all the values, what we need to do is we can write loop for element or item in iterator print item. So let's run this program. So here we can see we have got 4, 9, 16, 25, 39. So squares of the numbers starting from 2 till 10. So this is how we created a custom iterator. But what will happen if we write this for again? So let's check that. Will it print 2 times or not? So let's run this program. So here we can see it prints only 1 time. Why? Because this iterator of this instance object will call this and it will return self, basically the object itself. And since we have already updated the value of start from 2 to 10 or basically 11. So that's why it is getting stopped here. And when we run it again, so it starts with 11 only. So when it comes to next, so at the first iteration itself, it stop. So in order to resolve this issue, we need to uncomment this line. Why? Because whenever we call this for item in iterator, so this for loop will automatically call this method. And here we will initialize self.n as start value. And instead of start, we will use n. So self.n, here also self.n. So n is a variable which is representing the current value, and then we will use n plus 1. So here start and end value will always remain same, and n will get initialized whenever a new loop is created. So now let's run this program. So now we can see from 2 to 10 squares are printed, and then again from 2 to 10 squares are printed. And if I write print statement here, let's say in iter function, so let's check how many times it gets printed. So here it gets printed 2 times. Why? First, we have created the instance or the object of square class. Then we call this iter. So whenever we call this iter, this function is automatically called. Hence, in iter function is printed. Now, when we iterate over this iterator object using for loop, so this for loop internally again calls this iter. So therefore, it is printed again. And self.n is initialized to start, which is 2. Now for item in iterator, we are printing, basically we are calling the next method. Internally it is calling next method. So instead of writing print next item multiple times, we have just used the for loop, and for loop will internally call the next, and the value will be stored in the item. So here it is calling multiple times. So it 4, 9, 16 square of numbers are printed. So basically we are checking self.n is greater than n or not. So no, it is not, because it has just initialized with the start value 2. So therefore square value is self.n into n, basically 2 into 2, that is 4. Now is n is increased by one value, so n is now 3 and value is 4. So 4 is written and it gets printed here because of this print statement, and value of n is now 3. So when in the loop, this method will call again. So 3 is greater than 10, no. So value equals to 3 into 3, that is 9. N is now 4 and 9 is returned. That's why 9 is printed, and so on up to 100. Now, when we write the loop again on this iterator object, this iter method is called, and here we have written the in iter function statement. So that's why this got printed. After that, we have self.n equals to self.start. Since we are not using, or basically we are not updating self.start, therefore self.start will be 2 and self.n will be 11 because of this first for loop, which got terminated when self.n is 11 and self.n is 10 that we have defined. So now self.n is again initialized to self.start, that is 2. And now in this loop, whenever this item is generated. Basically next will be called and we will get the values from square of 2, 3, 4 and so on up to square of 10, and that's why this sequences again gets printed. So basically for this custom iterator, we this iter method is called once uh, because of either iter method or because of using it in for loop. Otherwise it will not get called, and after that when we are iterating over the values, this next method is called. So for because of for, this is automatically gets called. Otherwise we have to write next. I mean we need to use next keyword. In that we need to write the iterator next it, and we need to write multiple times till we get the stop iteration. So in order to remove this two times printing this in iter function, what we can do is we can directly use instance. We can directly iterate over the instance object, because internally this for loop will call will create an iterator object from this instance using it equals to iter instance, and then it will call next statement on it and assign the value to item again and again. So let's run this program. Now we can see iter is printed single time here, and the reason is the same. Instead of, we are not manually calling it through iter, and it is automatically called using iter inside the for loop. So this is all about writing the custom iterator.